What is up, everyone? We have another Draftkings DFS breakdown for the upcoming UFC card. This card being headlined by Mateus Nicolau versus Alex Perez. We got a full 13 fights, I believe. Let me double check. Yep, 13 fights. We have James Llontop got a short notice replacement, and he's a full minus 400 favorite at 8.2K. We'll get to that and everything else. But just to recap, um, this video is just identifying the best plays given the salaries, given the betting market, the prop market, who has the best attributes there, who has the best past historical DFS performance. Just using all the information that I have available to me to determine who's going to look like a good play. And I think this process is very helpful if you're playing single entry or three max. Um, but obviously, if you're playing a full 150, you are going to need to look past the best plays and rely on your optimizer or your sim tools in that instance. But regardless, even then, I still think this is a great process because what you'll notice is most of the plays that we identify as being good or elite plays are also the highest owned plays. And if that's not the case, then I think it's a great spot to get over on a play that should be higher owned. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and just get right into it. We will start with the top and work our way towards the middle, just so we have an idea of how fighters look in the same salary range. So we got Victor Henry versus Yahya. And I mean, what can I say? This line is very indicative of where Ronnie Yahya is at his point in his career. At this point in his career, he's old. He hasn't looked too great in his last few fights. He's kind of a one-dimensional grappler. He's plus 300. Victor Henry minus 400. So the pricing does make sense. With that being said, we're going to need a pretty big ceiling on a Victor Henry at 9.5K on a 13-fight card to make this work. He is a pure striker. So I'm going to need either just an absolute boatload of volume or a very, very strong ITD line. I don't think we're going to get either of those with him. We have to fight, pick him to go the distance. And Henry's ITD line is plus 160 without VIG. And that's nearly unplayable at 9.5K. And let's take a look at his striking line. 57. I mean, this is like almost unplayable. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to X him out fully, but he's to the point where that's actually a debate because of how bad he looks on the metrics right now. And then Yahya on the other side, I don't think Henry will be high owned at all. So you can't really play Yahya just for leverage. You're going to need Yahya to be an okay play himself. He's plus 300. He does have a grappling path to victory, but his ITD line is not great. I just think this fight looks like a dud on both sides. But especially Victor Henry, because if Yahya wins at, what is he, 6.7K, he probably does cover it. The problem is he's just not winning all that often. But with Yahya's decent win condition and all that, I weirdly think that it's like a Yahya or pass spot in this fight. But for cash games and all that, if you want like the win odds value, then sure, Victor Henry. But for a pure ceiling, Victor Henry does not look good. Next up, Petrovic versus Liane Na. Liane Na, I don't know if anyone remembers Daniel Lacerda. I think he's since been cut from the UFC, but the guy would go out there every fight and literally look for a finish in the first round, go all out. Now, he never ended up winning the UFC, but if he were to win, he would have scored 110 in all of his wins because that was his style. And Liane Na is like the female version of Daniel Lacerda in the sense that she will also go out and fight with reckless abandon, shoot tons of takedowns, be very aggressive, and she's yet to win in the UFC. But there's no doubt that in her wins, I just believe they have to come with upside. So unless she has a crazy non-existent win odds, which they kind of are, I mean, plus 400 is hard to get behind. The only reason I think it's somewhat of a good play, and I'm a me only, is because I think she has a huge ceiling if she does win. And then Petrovic on the other side, because Liang Na fights so hard in the first round and usually gasses out and gets finished second or third round, Petrovic will probably look good to get a finish here if Petrovic does win. And she is 9.4K, minus 200. That's pretty good for a 9.4K fighter. So Petrovic, she looks good. And I think that Na also looks good. For 20 max or below, Petrovic is obviously your preferred side, unless you just love super wide variance with playing a plus 400 fighter. So Petrovic is obviously the side in single entry, in 3 max, all of that stuff. But for MME, I think that Liang Na is potentially a very strong, low-owned punt kind of play. Okay. Moving on. We have Souza versus Mann. I don't think this fight will look all that great. Mann has some takedown upside, I suppose, but not all that dangerous. She's plus 300 to win. Non-existent ITD line. Souza plus 225, all the way up at 9.2K. That's not good at all. Is there any? Not high volume. This fight to me just seems like a dud. I guess 150 max only. I wouldn't touch that fight in 20 or below. Then we got Euros Medic versus Tim Means. Medic, I believe, will be a good play. All of his wins have come by finish. He definitely has early knockout upside against a guy in Tim Means, who is what I would describe as your typical crafty vet. How does Tim Means win this fight? I think he survives an early storm and, eventually just guts out a win by either getting a very late finish or a close split decision type of fight. But for Medic, if he wins, I believe it's probably by an early finish. So we got minus 290. Healthy money line for the price. Minus 110 ITD line would be good to see for him. And yeah, he's well within that. So I think that Medic looks like a good play to me. And since he's a pure striker, I also want to see what he is in round 1. Plus 150. Yeah, I think Medic is a good play. And then Tim Means on the other side. 7.1K plus 350 or so. He's plus 600. So yeah, the metrics just aren't good enough for me to include him as a strong play, but I'm certainly not going to X him out or anything like that. He's definitely live in 150, especially depending on how much ownership Euros Medic gets. But for purposes of this video, it's going to be a Medic pass. Diniz versus Austin Lane, heavyweight fight that rates the finish in the first round. We got under 1.5 round line, heavily juiced. Diniz is a pretty large favorite. Lane coming back at about plus 250. Single entry 3 max. Diniz is almost a staple play with these metrics. He's minus 150 in round 1. He's 9K flat. Obviously a very strong ITD line to go along with it. What I will say for Austin Lane, though, is that I got to believe Diniz is going to be pretty popular. And Austin Lane, he's plus 275 at 7.2K, and he does carry with him some takedown upside, which means that I think Austin Lane is actually a very strong piece of leverage in 150. And if you do have the guts to play a plus 250 guy in 20 or below, he also is, mathematically speaking, a strong play in that too. So yeah, I like both sides. I think that Diniz is going to be very popular. Austin Lane carries upside as well, although he's obviously he's not winning the fight as often, of course. But I do like both sides of this fight in pretty much all contests. But depending on your risk tolerance, I would stick with Diniz only in the 20 or below. Then we got Ryan Spann, Guskov. This is another fight that under 1.5 round line, heavily juiced, high variance fight. I think one of these guys is probably going to get finished in round 1, and the winner will score extremely well. Guskov, especially at 7.3K with an elite ITD line, Spann with a good ITD line as well for his price. This fight just seems like a great fight to target in all contest types, and Guskov only plus 170 as well, so maybe a little bit less variance than playing a guy like Austin Lane all the way up at plus 250. Nonetheless, I think both sides of this fight look like an elite target. Then we got Maheshete versus Gabriel Benitez. Should be a striking matchup. I think Maheshete will have quite a bit of finishing upside here on the feet. And as long as he looks good with the metrics, I imagine he will be a good play at 8.8K. Minus 110. That's pretty good for an 8K fighter. And then Benitez, 7.4K, maybe plus 275-ish. He's plus 350. It's pretty fringy at best. Definitely in play in MME, though, for sure. But I wouldn't touch Benitez in 20 or below. Next up, the main event, Nicolau versus Perez. Perez should be the clear side in DFS because he's a moderate underdog. And if he wins, he has 90 to 100 point upside, if not higher, over the 5 rounds or with a finish. Nicolau on the other side, he doesn't fight with a very high pace typically, but at the end of the day, he does have 5 rounds to work with. These guys are flyweights. There's just too many variables to really say that Nicolau is a bad play, but I do believe that Perez, just because of the pricing, and obviously when we're doing this analysis, we're assuming that these fighters win. Like we're factoring in what they score in their wins, and assuming Perez wins, he's going to be a better play because he's lower priced. So long story short, I think that both sides of this are good. I don't look at it as a fight that has to go off, but there's just too many variables to try and pick and choose if it's, this could this could happen, and then this could, like, it's just a good fight to target overall with the 5 rounds and the potential of a finish. It's just, I like both sides in all contests. Jonathan Pearce, David Onama, this is one of the key fights. So you got Jonathan Pearce, who fits the exact DraftKings DFS archetype that you're looking for. Vicious wrestling pace, finishing upside, total strikes. He does it all, really. And he's only 8.6K. Now, here's the thing. Onama on the other side, in this matchup at least, is a pure striker. So we really need him to have a good ITD line to play him. 7.6K, maybe plus 250 or so would be good for him. And he's well within that. And Jonathan Pearce has a good ITD line himself, along with his wrestling upside. So Jonathan Pearce is an elite play. But here's the point I want to make, and this is something I learned from Eric Haber Sheets over at True DFS, and it's a very important concept in MMA DFS. Is when you have an absolutely elite play on one side, especially if that elite play is the favorite, which it is in Jonathan Pearce in this case. The other side of it, if it's even good or maybe even decent, the other side becomes extremely strong from an ownership perspective. And I do believe that Jonathan Pearce will get a lot of ownership. And if that's the case, David Onama, do not overlook him. Make sure to get a good amount of him because he provides some great leverage as a good play himself that's going up against an insane play. So for just the metrics, Onama is a good play and Pearce is an elite play. But when it comes down to ownership and all those concepts, Onama might be a better play. But nonetheless, both sides of that fight look very strong. Then we got Karine Silva versus Ariane Lipski, but it looks like her last name changed to De Silva. Anyways, Ariane, I'll just call her Lipski because that's what she's gone by her whole career until 5 seconds ago. Ariane Lipski, 7.7K. The line looks about right, and I don't know, maybe plus 250 would be good to see for her. She's like plus 280-ish, so a little bit fringy. And then Karine Silva, plus 125. But another one of these fighters, well, okay, first of all, that ITD line by itself is pretty good. And then you add in the fact that she has grappling upside and historically has been a very strong DFS player. For MMA. I think that Karine Silva looks really good. And Lipski, I just think is a pretty fringy play on the other side of it. All right, we got 2 more fights to go. Figlak versus Hubbard. I don't think this fight will rate all too well. Heavily expected to go the distance. Both guys might have a hint of takedown upside. Maybe Hubbard more so than Figlak. But I don't think the ITD lines will be good, which they're not. Is there anything sticking out here in the props that I'm missing? No, not really. So I think this fight's a dud, just 150 only. Then last but not least, or no, we have 2 more. Machado versus Mays. Another. I think this fight looks like a sloppy heavyweight fight. Expected to go the distance. Pick 'em. Price tag looks about right. And both guys with pretty bad ITD lines. So again, I think it's a 150 fight, but not a priority by any means. And then last but not least, the elephant in the room. So Llontop got a short notice replacement, and he's 8.8. He's 8.2K, and he's a 4-1 favorite with the fight favored to not go the distance. We don't have the IATD line yet, but I imagine it will look pretty good. Llontop's a good play. If I was playing cash games, if I was playing single entry 3-max, I'd probably start off a lot of my lineups with Llontop. But I think there's a lot of ways that you can potentially avoid him in MME. There's a lot of good plays you can target throughout the card that I do think with the 13 fights, there's a chance that obviously there's a chance, but there's a how do I want to put this? It's realistic to get around Llontop without costing yourself too many raw points. But for the purposes of this video, Llontop is obviously just an elite play with the line value, with the finishing upside, all that stuff, the price, everything. And then with his opponent, Padilla, 6.9K, plus 340. Doesn't look all that exciting. It really is just an MME play only for Padilla. And from my experience, fighters like this, when they're huge favorites at like 8K or wherever, they usually get like 40 to 50% ownership. So I do imagine Llontop will be around 40-ish at least percent owned this weekend. So let's go through the card as a whole and just recap all the best plays. Victor Henry, I think, is an awful play. Petrovic is a good play. Souza is a pretty bad play. Medic is a good play. Diniz is a good play. Spann is a good play. Maybe an elite play if you want to say that. Maheshete, good play. Nicolau, good play. Jonathan Pearce, I think, is a elite play. Karine Silva, pretty good play. Figlak and Machado, pretty bad plays. Llontop, elite play. Mays, bad play. Hubbard, fringy but pretty bad play. Lipski, fringy play. Onama, good play. Perez is good. Benitez, pretty fringy but a bad play. Guskov, elite underdog. Austin Lane, pretty good underdog. Tim Means, pretty bad play. Mann, pretty bad. Padilla, pretty bad. Liana, very good. MME, punt play, and Yahya, I guess MME only. So that'll do it, I think. There's a lot of options on this card. Even with the plays that I called bad plays, a lot of them I looked at and thought, these guys are really good plays in MME. Guys like Tim Means, they're obviously high variance, and they're not people you want to be playing in low entry contests. But if you're playing the full MME, almost everyone's in play here, and there's a lot of options you can go to get away from Llontop. But that'll do it. If anyone has any questions, please leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next one.